Welcome back to Criminologist, the channel where we dive deep into the mysteries of the criminal world. Today, we're uncovering a series of haunting cold cases that have spanned decades. Stephanie Isaacson. Stephanie Isaacson was a 14-year-old teenager living with her parents in Las Vegas, Nevada. Stephanie was a freshman at El Dorado High School. On the morning of June 1, 1989, Stephanie left her home near Nellis Boulevard and Stewart Avenue at around 6:30 a.m. to walk to her school. She had walked the route to her school a number of times and would usually take a shortcut through a vacant desert lot at Stewart Avenue and Lynn Lane to get to her school faster. She would never make it to her school that day. That afternoon, when she did not return to her home, her father became worried and went to look for her. He visited her school and found out. Stephanie did not arrive at school that day. Her father immediately reported her missing. The police launched an extensive search for her. They canvassed her usual route that she took for her school. Soon, they discovered her books and belongings scattered in the vacant desert lot. Next to the belongings, they found her body. A coroner determined she had been sexually assaulted, beaten, and strangled to death. Investigators searched every possible lead and investigated a number of people, but to no avail, and the case would cold soon after. DNA found at the crime scene was entered into CODIS database in 2007, but no matches could be found. Then, in January 2021, with the generous donation of $5,000 from a local resident, Justin Wu, founder of nonprofit organization Vegas Helps, the investigators were able to send the DNA found at the crime scene for testing to Othram Labs in order to find any leads. Othram Labs was able to use genome sequencing to build a genetic profile of the killer from the remaining DNA evidence of just 15 human cells. Usually, 750 to 100 nanograms of DNA is used to create a DNA profile, but in this case, only 0.12 nanograms or 15 human cells were available for testing. This sets a new lower limit on the quantity required to build a DNA profile. With the help of the DNA profile, police were able to link Darren Roy Marchand as the killer. Darren had been arrested for the murder of another woman named Nanette Vanderberg in 1986, 3 years before Stephanie's murder. However, the case was dismissed due to lack of evidence. Darren's DNA from the Nanette's crime scene was matched with the DNA found at Stephanie's crime scene, and it turned out to be a match. However, investigators could not charge Darren for Stephanie's or Nanette's murder, as he committed suicide in 1995. The case was finally solved after 32 years. Michelle Wyatt. Michelle Wyatt was a 20-year-old student who lived in San Diego with her roommate. She had graduated from Patrick Henry High School and was attending Grossmont College in 1980. She worked as a cashier at a Mission Hills Safeway store. Her parents described her as an independent go-getter. On October 9, 1980, Michelle's roommate entered her condo complex at 10,586 Kerrigan Court in Santee to find Michelle lying in her living room floor, dead. She immediately contacted the police. An autopsy revealed Michelle had been raped and strangled to death with a telephone cord. The contents of her purse were scattered around, but nothing seemed to have been taken, and the police ruled out robbery as a motive. In the hours before Michelle's murder, her boyfriend had left her apartment early morning around 1 a.m. and locked the door behind him. Sometime later, neighbors heard screams coming from Michelle's apartment, but no one called 911 for help. Over the years, investigators would search every possible lead, but to no avail. 16 years later, about 90 potential suspects were screened and asked to provide DNA samples to compare against the DNA found at the crime scene, but nothing tuned up. Then, in June 2000, with the advancement in DNA technology, evidence collected from the crime scene was sent for re-examination. Soon, testing revealed that there were 2 separate DNA profiles at the crime scene. One of the DNA profiles belonged to Michelle's boyfriend, but the other was an unknown male suspect. Michelle's boyfriend has been eliminated as a suspect. The unknown male suspect's DNA was entered into Combined DNA Index System, CODIS, but no matches turned up. In March 2020, investigators ran the DNA through familial DNA search, but again did not find any matches. Then, in September 2020, San Diego County Sheriff Homicide Unit's cold case team used investigative genetic genealogy to find any leads. After 9 months of investigation with the help of FBI and other law enforcement agencies, investigators identified John Patrick Hogan as a potential suspect. John had moved to Santee in the 1970s and was 18 years old at the time of Michelle's murder. He studied at the Sanatan High School and lived about a mile away from Michelle. He had friends who lived in the apartment complex that Michelle lived in and was known to visit frequently. John joined Air Force in 1979 and was stationed in Mexico for a brief period. During his lifetime, he moved around and traveled from California to Arizona and Idaho. Unfortunately, John could not be charged as he died of drug overdose in 2004 at the age of 42. John is not considered a suspect in any other case so far, but investigators have shared their findings to the police in the places that John lived in 1970s and 1980s. Leslie Mccrae. Leslie Mccrae was a 17-year-old teenager living in an apartment with her boyfriend on St. John's Avenue in Jacksonville, Florida. Leslie was studying at the University of North Florida and dreamed of becoming a model. On Christmas Eve of 1985, around 3 a.m., Leslie's boyfriend woke up to a fine man with short brown hair kneeling by his bed. The man was holding a knife in his hand and tied Leslie's boyfriend's hands and feet with neckties. He then tied Leslie up and took her with him against her will out of the apartment through the back door, leaving Leslie's boyfriend tied up in the bedroom. Her boyfriend eventually freed himself and called the police at 6 a.m. A few hours later, Leslie's nude body was found by a passerby along Old Middleburg Road near Interstate 295, 5 miles from her apartment. She had been sexually assaulted, beaten, and stabbed multiple times in her head, chest, and neck. According to the Florida Times-Union newspaper, the police found no sign of forced entry or a struggle in the apartment. Police were unable to find any clues at the crime scene that could lead to a potential break, and with no leads and suspects, the case would grow cold soon after. However, over the years, her family did not give up hope on getting justice. In 2019, her family reached out to Project Cold Case and asked the JSO Cold Case Unit to reopen and re-examine the case. In 2020, investigators re-examined the evidence found at the crime scene with updated technology, and the suspect's DNA profile matched to an inmate named David Nelson Austin in the Michigan Corrections Database. The investigators then went to Michigan in April 2021 to interview and collect more DNA from David to confirm the match. The tests confirmed the match, and in August 2021, David was charged with first-degree murder, 2 counts of armed kidnapping, and 1 count of armed sexual battery in Leslie Mccrae's murder. David is serving 2 life sentences for 2 sexual assaults from 1988. David was never considered a suspect in the case before and had never been interviewed for the crime. He had lived in Jacksonville for a short period of time and then moved to Michigan, where he committed the 2 crimes for which he was caught. Now, prosecutors are hoping David will be extradited to Florida soon to stand trial. Patricia Kalitzke and Lloyd Duane Bogle were a teenage couple living in Great Falls, Montana. In 1956, Patricia was a 16-year-old studying at Great Falls High School, while Lloyd was an 18-year-old airman from Waco, Texas, who had been recently stationed to Malmstrom Air Force Base. The two had met at a party a month earlier and fell in love with each other. On January 3, 1956, 3 young boys were hiking along the Sun River near Wadsworth Park in Great Falls, Montana, when they stumbled upon a body of a young man lying next to a car. They immediately notified the police. The young man was soon identified as Lloyd Duane Bogle. He had been shot in the head, and his hands were tied behind his back with his own belt. His car was on with handbrake pulled, and its headlights were on. Nothing appeared to be stolen, as all his belongings and money were still in the car. The police would soon learn that his girlfriend Patricia was with him the previous night, and she hadn't returned home and was reported missing. The police launched an extensive search for her. The next day, on January 4th, 1956, Patricia's body would be found by a county road worker on Vineyard Road, north of Great Falls. Her body was found about 8 miles from where Lloyd's body was found. She had been shot in head as well. It is unclear if the police believed Patricia had been sexually assaulted at the time, as she'd been found fully clothed. The police did not believe robbery was the motive, as all the valuables, including money and an expensive camera, were found inside Lloyd's car. There were very few to no clues for investigators to follow, and over the years, police investigated about 35 people, including the famous gangster James Joseph Whitey Bulger Jr. But all of them were eventually cleared, and case grew cold. In 2001, investigators sent a microscopic slide of vaginal swab taken from Patricia's body to the Montana State Crime Lab for analysis. The lab found a sperm cell that did not belong to Lloyd, suggesting Patricia had been raped. In 2019, the Cascade County investigators sent the DNA sample found on Patricia's body for additional testing to Bogle technology. They uploaded the DNA sample to the genealogy databases and found a potential familial connection. Soon they were able to narrow down the family tree to an individual suspect named Kenneth Gould, a man born and raised in Great Falls, Montana. However, as Kenneth died in 2007 and was cremated, the investigators had to reach out to his surviving children and ask for DNA sample to confirm the match. It was found Kenneth lived with his family just a mile away from where Patricia lived. Kenneth did not have a criminal record and was a horse trainer who was known to ride throughout the area. Kenneth was married at the time and would have been 29 when the couple were murdered. After the murder, Kenneth would sell his property and move to Missouri in 1967. Kenneth was never interviewed in the couple's murder, and investigators could not find any connection between him and victims. Both Lloyd and Patricia's family have deceased without any answers, but the surviving relatives were relieved to have some closure. The case was solved after 65 years. If you found these stories fascinating, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss an update. Do you think justice was served in these cases? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And remember, every cold case solved brings closure to victims and their families, reminding us all that the truth can never be silenced. Stay safe, stay curious, and we'll see you in the next episode of Criminologist.